Hello everybody. This is going to be kind of a quick video. I just wanted to do a quick review on the Macbeth graphic novel. Well, it'd be nice if I had lighting in this room. I have some thoughts. I really enjoy the play Macbeth. I like Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare. I like his writing style. I like the sound of it, the way it flows. So I thought I'd take a chance on the graphic novel and see what they do. I'll say that the artwork's not bad. I mean, it's good for what it is. There's some more images. The battle scenes are, well, let me find one. A lot of red, but they're not gory. There is some blood, as to be expected. It is the bloodiest of Shakespeare's plays. So the artwork's fine. I like that they started with, the cast of characters, so you can have an idea of what they look like, because they're not always addressed by name. I think my biggest issue is that you lose the language. They did modernize the language quite a bit so that it's going to be easier for students to follow if they're reading. I can see this being used as a supplemental text in a classroom situation. Although Macbeth is generally taught to seniors, sometimes juniors. So if you're 11th, 12th grade, junior, senior high school, this is written well below that grade level. This is written like on a middle school level. So it would only be as a supplemental thing, because I really think the students need to be exposed to actual Shakespearean language and see where certain things come from. I think that's important. One thing I really do like is at the back, the supplemental stuff. Well, not the glossary. The glossary sucks. We'll get into that in a minute. But there's a nice one-page biography of Shakespeare. Easy to digest, easy to read, easy to understand. I think, students would like that. Sometimes you don't get enough in a textbook situation, or sometimes you get too much. This is a nice amount. It's easily digested. It's, Then what I really like is there's a whole page on the real Macbeth, because he was a real guy. And we have the Macbeth family tree based on the real guy. So you can see how all the characters are connected. And if I'm reading this correctly, they are both descended from Malcolm I, who was king in 943, from 943 to 954. And then as it comes through, then, the two lines, it divides into two lines based on his kids. The Duff line goes to Lady Macbeth, and the second line goes to Macbeth, which I think is interesting. So they were kind of like, I don't know, cousins, I guess, which isn't all that surprising considering in the history of the royalty, a lot of intermarriage within cousins and things happened. I also like that they summarize the characters, so you get an idea of who they are just at a glance. That's nice. I really like this link map, so you can see how all the characters are connected. I think it's very good. And then there's some famous quotations from Macbeth, which gives you where it is in the play, what the original line is, what their adaptation is, and what it means. So there are some things that maybe students aren't quite grasping. This might help. So the supplemental stuff is fantastic, except for the glossary. Let me talk about the glossary. The glossary is giving you words that even middle schoolers should already know. Like army. Wouldn't they already know what an army is by middle school? And certainly by junior and senior in high school, because some of them are considering going into the army at that point. Bang. Bang is a sudden loud noise, such as the noise of an explosion. Kids know what that is already. Bell. Kids know what bells are. Cave. They know what a cave is. I mean, it's just ridiculous. There's a few things that are good, like Saxon, I think, is a good one to put in a glossary, because you may not know what a Saxon is. But most kids are going to know what a flag is, and that's in here under the glossary. So, I don't know. Actually, out of this, there are maybe 1, 2. On quick look, about 3 words that they define in the glossary that actually belong in the glossary. The rest of it is just like everyday words that the kids are already using in their life. So I don't understand that. They do a good job of keeping the essence of the story. There's a quote on the back from a teacher. It says, "You've managed to retain the essence of the tale and made Shakespeare accessible for more students than ever before." Okay, yeah, I get that. That I agree with. It kills me to lose the language. And I think that's important. So I would say, if you're going to use this in a classroom situation, use it as a supplemental thing, or possibly with students who have an IEP, which is an individualized education plan, for those who aren't familiar with the term. Generally, it's used with students that have some form of either learning disability or physical disability. It's how you put the adaptations into place to make school more accessible to that particular student. My son had some stuff that he ended up on an IEP, and so that's why I'm familiar with it. And there are kids that struggle with things with a learning disability that this would be helpful. Seeing an image and having the simplified language would be useful. So I see it as a really good thing in that situation. But your everyday average student is probably going to be a little bit bored because it's so simple. It's like they simplified it too much, maybe. But I do think the supplemental stuff in the back is useful, and I like the cast of characters being identified by picture at the beginning, so that as you're reading, you have an idea of who's who. Because, like I said, they don't always address them by name. One of the most famous scenes is the witch scene. Double, double, toil and trouble, cauldron, burn, fire, bubble. They edited. I didn't like that at all. It was fine, I guess, in that, thrice the brinded cat hath mewed, and they say the cat cried out 3 times. Well, okay, so you're losing the fact that it's a gray cat. I don't know that that necessarily makes a whole lot of difference, but you're losing that. Brinded would have been a good thing to put in the glossary. Mewed would have been fine in the glossary, because not everybody recognizes mew as meow. But to just change it all together, and yeah, some of the other stuff they changed, and I'm like, were those changes actually necessary? Because in that scene, most of the things I think you could probably figure out fairly easily. There's enough context clues. And that would be a great exercise for context clues. But they edit it to the point where it's barely recognizable.
Mew.
And I just talked about Mew.
Well.
Thrice the brinded cat hath mewed.
Well.
Or in this book, the cat cried out 3 times.
Ha.
Anyway. So those are some thoughts. I gave it 3 stars. I think it accomplishes what it sets out to do. It's just like the glossary is garbage. And you do lose a lot of the language. It's oversimplified. But I guess maybe if you're gearing it toward, you want to give kids exposure at maybe 4th or 5th grade, this will be perfect. But if you're gearing it towards the age level that's actually reading the play, which would be your juniors and seniors in high school, they're going to be bored to tears. I mean, I read it in maybe an hour. Well, it took a little longer than that because I had other things going on at the time. I was just reading a little bit at a time. But altogether, grand total time, maybe an hour, if that. So it's fast to read through. Couple places I got confused as to who characters were because they don't say all the time who they are. So unless you're familiar with the scene, you may not know everybody involved. That's where having the pictures at the beginning helped. But overall, I gave it like 3 to 3.5 stars, somewhere in that range, because it does accomplish what it sets out to do. It makes it easier as an adaptation. The artwork's decent. Most of the supplemental stuff is really, really good. But I do feel like it oversimplifies things a little bit. So those are my thoughts. If you happen to be an English teacher, maybe this will give you an idea of a way to adapt for students that need a little extra help. Watching a movie doesn't always do it. And a lot of times that's the only supplemental stuff you get in a class is, oh, we read it in class, we talked about it a little bit. Let's watch a movie and we'll be done with it. But there again, movie adaptations cut things. They don't always follow dialogue perfectly. Yeah, there's a lot of things, and it's one person's interpretation. It's the director's interpretation of what's going on. And so unless you watch every movie made of it, you're only getting one perspective. So this is another perspective. We'll look at it that way. It's another perspective. It's a modernized language. It's simplified. It does what it intends to do. And make it accessible for students. I just don't think it reaches the age level that is normally studying the play. So take that for what it's worth. I do have a degree in English education, so I am qualified to teach high school. I did teach Macbeth when I did my student teaching. That was an experience and a half because I worked with a teacher who liked to take over and didn't like the way I would teach certain things. And I'm like, give me a chance to teach it. If you don't like what I'm doing, give me some suggestions on how to do it better, but don't just take over. I'm not learning that way. So, yeah. There were some hurdles, and my students were more confused than ever because we wouldn't do it every day because we had to schedule times to use the computer lab because they were also writing term papers. And doing a major research paper on top of a Shakespeare play, they don't work together very well unless you are researching that play. So here they are doing these other projects, and he's stepping in with all this other crap that he wants done rather than letting me run the classroom as my classroom. So my students had a bad time of Macbeth. And he sprang it on me. You got to do a test on this. And you need to do it today. And I'm like, you couldn't have told me this a couple days ago so I could have written a test. So I found the supplemental stuff that came with the teacher's guide and printed off some stuff for the test and typed up a page of my own questions, crossed out something, and he's like, that's sloppy work. You sprung it on me at the last possible second. You wanted me to give a test in first period to students who weren't prepared for a test because we didn't discuss doing a test. And then when they all failed it, he decided to drop that grade out of the grade book. Well, then what was the point of having me give them a test on that day? Why couldn't we say, hey, we're going to do a test on Friday. Here's what you need to know. And then I could have taken the supplemental materials, put together my own test, not have to cross things off. It's just like, really? He's like, you can't test them on stuff you didn't discuss. You're the one telling me I got to do a test right this minute. Hello? So yeah, and I talked to some of my students after they graduated, and I said, okay, I'm really sorry about how Macbeth went down. It should have been a lot better. We could have done more things. Did you get anything out of it? And they're like, not really. I said, we could see that he was doing stuff that, we think it would have been better if you could have just done it and been the way you were doing it and been done with it. Instead of being interrupted every couple days for, oh, we got to go to the computer lab today, without telling me we were using the computer lab. Because he'd sign us up for it and then be like, spring it on me at the last second. So any plans I made were out the window. And then had the nerve when he submitted grades for me as a student teacher to mark me down for being unprepared because he didn't tell me that he scheduled XYZ. And I'm like, we're supposed to be working together and you're working against me. Are you afraid I'm taking your job or something? I'm trying to learn how to do the job, not to take your job, unless you're retiring in the next year. So, yeah, anyway. A good teacher can make or break a play. I was lucky I had good teachers all the way along when it came to doing Shakespeare stuff, and I got something out of it. And I took a Shakespeare class when I was going to art school. If you don't know me, I've got 3 degrees. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts where I majored in photography with a minor in art history. I had enough credit hours to have a minor in English, but not the correct courses to do a minor in English. Of course, the school didn't offer that at the time. One of the classes I took was Shakespeare and really loved it. It was a great class. And we did Hamlet and we talked about Macbeth and, the biggies. And it was a good class. Had a great teacher. And then, in high school, I had good teachers. So I had all the way along good teachers for this kind of thing. So here I was hoping to be good like they were, and I got saddled with a teacher who wanted to take over every time I did something they didn't like, or did something different from how they did it, and makes a difference. So my students were completely confused, and Macbeth was a mess for them. I think if they could have had this as a supplemental thing, then maybe they would have got more out of it. So there's another situation where that might be a good thing. I don't know. But overall, I think it does what it set out to do to make Macbeth more accessible, easier to understand. It does that. The supplemental materials are good, except for the glossary, which is crap. But yeah, overall, I think if you're a teacher, then Macbeth is a good one. But, oh yeah, I was talking about my degrees. I have the BFA in photography. I have an MA in English. And No. I have a BFA, which is Bachelor of Fine Arts. I have a Bachelor of Arts, a BA, not an MA. I don't have a master's in anything. I should by now. I should have a PhD by now. But things being as they are, didn't happen. A BA in English and a BS in education. And I find it funny that BS is the education degree, because a lot of the stuff we had to go through, I would classify as BS. Anyway, now that I'm completely off track, but my BS in education is Integrated Language Arts, which is an AYA, adolescent young adult. So essentially, high school English teacher with a minor in interpersonal communications. So what do? I sit here and make videos because I can't find a real job. Sucks. I should be teaching and I can't get a teaching job because there's never any available. Or I find out about them after the deadline and I'm like, why couldn't I find out about it when I could still apply? But anyway, that's all I have for today. I've rattled on for over 20 minutes about this, and the second half of this video is actually stuff that probably doesn't make any difference. Macbeth, graphic novel, does what it sets out to do. Not great, not crap, except for the glossary. If you can't tell, I hate the glossary. I think they could have done way better. Good supplemental materials, artwork's decent. Might be good for kids on an IEP, might be good as a supplemental material if you're in a situation like I was when I was trying to teach it. So yeah, overall, I gave it 3 to 3.5 stars, which is, in the like category. It wasn't spectacular, but it was fine. And so if you happen to be a teacher, there's some thoughts for you. And I will see you in the next video. Don't forget to do all the YouTube-y things. Comment, like, share, subscribe, ring the bell icon, blah, blah, blah. Bye.